Alright, so today we're going to be installing the front strut brace on my 79 SC. Front strut creates pre-tension between the strut mounts in the front of the car. It strengthens the chassis, gives you better handling through corners, and it looks pretty awesome when you pop the frunk. The front strut I decided to go with is made by Rennline, and I went with their 3-point system. This is the first time that I will have done this. I mentioned in a previous video that the reason I'm doing these is that I have no mechanical background whatsoever. This is the first 911 I've owned. I want to do certain projects myself, others my mechanic will take care of. This is one of the projects that I think for a home enthusiast with little mechanical experience, it's a really basic and simple thing to do. That being said, following the instructions that I received from Rennline were a little bit tricky, so I thought I would make this video, share my experience of doing the install with you, and hopefully anybody else that's looking to do the same can learn from my mistakes, which I will undoubtedly make, and have a slightly easier job than I've had of trying to figure out how to put all this stuff together. So for now, let's have a look at the parts that came from Rennline.
Okay, in addition to the 2 bars, we've got 4 plates that make up the truss mounts, 6 red spacers, 2 bar ends, a selection of bolts, washers and nuts that hold all this stuff together, and 1-page set of instructions from Rennline. So let's see if we can figure this out.
Okay, so this is where it all starts to get a little funky. The instructions that Rennline send to you, like I say, the reason I'm making these videos is because this stuff makes sense to a mechanic or anybody with a background in cars. As somebody who's doing all this for the first time and doesn't have that experience, this doesn't all make perfect sense to me. The explanation makes sense to somebody with that previous background, but to somebody like me, I'm not too sure that I can follow this perfectly. So, for example, the main instruction that's given in very small print on the Rennline note is, it says that the driver's side top bracket is marked with a red dot on the top side. Okay, so these are the brackets, you have 4 of them. The issue that I have is that there are 2 brackets with the red dots. Now, I don't know whether those red dots were an error. I don't know if there's an error in the instructions. But what I can tell you is that I spent about an hour last night pre-assembling these to try to figure out which unit goes on top, because you can see they're not a perfect fit when they're together. They're perfect when there's spaces in between, but when they're together, they're not a perfect fit. What I found in doing a pre-assembly of these is that on the parts I received, these 2 red dots, they need to be facing one another. Neither of them indicates whether it's a top bracket or a bottom bracket, but they need to be facing one another. When you do a pre-assembly with the spacers, it's extremely clear as to which way round they go. But based on what I received, the 2 red dots need to be facing one another, the spacers go in between, and then we start mounting it to the car. So let's get that done. Alright, so the first mount is going to go into the front strut passenger side mounts. This is the side I'm working on first. For me, this is the mount that doesn't have the red dots on it. There are 3 bolts here, 17mm, and they're arranged in a triangle pattern. These, from what I can figure out, and again, there's no instructions in Rennline for somebody like me that just doesn't know this stuff. So the best place that I can figure out, and I can't find any detailed pictures on the side at all, so there's only 1 bolt here this side can go into, so we're going to go into this one. And then I'm using the bolt that is closest to the center of the car, so the one furthest away from the outside edge. And then this should just bolt straight on and should work pretty nicely. Now, I have realized that in doing this, that this, which is what the brace screws into, I've mounted in the wrong hole. This needs to be forward, because this one is actually going to be used for the 3rd point brace. So I need to change this around, which I'm going to do now. Now the other thing is that I I took a look at this last night. I was worried that there would be a nut underneath the car inside the wheel arch that I would have to jack the car so that when I undo this, I've got some tension on the nut below, it don't lose it, and then I can put it all back together again. I loosened it a touch, the nut doesn't move. I believe it's welded to the body. Again, I don't know. I couldn't actually find it in the Bentley manual. It's not in there. Certainly nothing on Rennline that tells you about this. So I haven't jacked the car. I'm going to undo this bolt to find out. I'm only going to loosen one. And my hope is that if I can undo these two bolts, get these mounts on, keep the car in position, the wheels are straight forward, that in theory, this should not need a realignment. That being said, again, I don't know, so I'm going to call my mechanic once I've told him about what I've done here and see what his opinion is. Nothing I need to worry about right now. I'm not driving the car, but we'll do a realignment if it's necessary in spring anyway, so I'm not too worried about this. So I'm going to switch this around and we'll get cracking on this now. Okay, so I put this all in. The Rennline instructions said to do everything so that it's finger tight, which I've done. This bolt here is finger tight. There's nothing in Rennline that tells you what the torque specs should be for this bolt, so I need to give them a shout to find out. I mean, it's just maybe just as tight as so that it's secure, but I want to know. These ones are in the Bentley manual, which I'm going to give you those specs when I tighten them all up. The one thing that I noticed, we talked about there being 3 bolts here. So we've got the 2 back here. So as soon as I took the original factory one out, as soon as I took the front one out, of course the plate is held in place by the other bolt, so there's no problem there. What I didn't realize is that, of course, as soon as you take this bolt out, there's only one here. So this front plate comes off completely. There's also a washer in there as well. I put them all back. It's just something to be aware of, so that if you're doing it for the first time, like me, then that this doesn't just fall down somewhere where it's irretrievable or difficult to get to, or any of those sorts of things. So this all looks fairly good, so I'm going to move over to the driver's side. Alright, so that's the driver's side done. Same deal as the passenger, there's nothing really to worry about. I did want to point one thing out though. So as I mentioned, the system that I am installing is the 3-point system. So the points will go from here over to the passenger side, and then from the passenger side down to the brace on the master brake cylinder. Because of that, I have a spacer here on the driver's side, but I do not have one on the passenger side, because this spacer on the passenger side is exactly where that second brace mounts to create that 3rd point. It's just something to be aware of. If you've gone and ordered the 2-point system single bar, you'll have a spacer on either side, a red spacer on either side. If you have the 2-bar system, I'm guessing, I haven't got one, both of these spaces will be occupied by the 2nd bar. Okay, so the first problem, exactly the reason why I'm making these videos, is that, as you can see, the only way that this bar would screw in between the 2 bar ends results in the Rennline logo being upside down. Now, the bar end is only thread one way because, of course, that's how you create the tensioning between the 2 points. So you turn it one way to tighten it, create more pressure, another way to loosen it to create more pressure. The amount of pressure that's needed between these 2 points is a whole other question, and I need to figure that out another time. But I do believe if you're going to do something, do it properly. So I need to switch these around. The only way to do that is to switch over the 2 bar ends. So to remove this guy and switch it to that one. So I'm going to get to that now. Okay, so next issue is that just getting this bar into this bolt, it's just not going to work while it's mounted in this bracket. Again, not mentioned on the Rennline instructions, so I'm going to take this guy out, thread it into this, then put it back into the bracket, which is going to make more sense. Alright, so the next install is going to be to the second bar, which creates the third point. This is the end that's going to mount to the master brake cylinder bracket. The other end is already has a monoball joint in it. That's going to slide into the area that doesn't have the space that I mentioned before. When I got the kit, I ordered the 3-point system. The instructions that were sent were for the 2-point system, so it doesn't talk about this bushing. But if you go on the Rennline website, they have all of their instructions there, which is awesome. I'm going to include links to that below. So if you've got the 3-point system, you need to download the 3-point instructions. Everything's the same up to there. It's just this last little component. So they say that if you have the brass bushing zip tied to the monoball joint, you need to take this out and you need to use a vise or a hammer to put the bushing into the monoball. As I don't have a vise, I'm going to be attacking this with a hammer. So fingers crossed, that all works out. Okay, so this third point is going into the master brake cylinder bracket. There are 4 bolts holding this on. They're going into the front 2. They look to be just nuts that pop off here. Put the bracket on and reattach with the factory equipment. I am a little concerned that once this goes on, the bolts are not going to be long enough. But we're going to find out right away.
This bolt here is stuck. Now this bolt here, I just can't get the sucker out, so I'm going to have to take this off.
For the record, that bolt is an 18mm. Yeah, got it. Okay, so yeah, I literally just had to turn it a tiny little bit to free this. So let's see. This should just slot nicely on. Perfect.
Okay, so back in here again. This bolt's just catching, but I do not have enough space here because of this sucker to get this on it to tighten it up.
I ended up taking this out. So the bolt that I showed you previously, I took that out, took the bar out, and I had tons of space to put this back in, which is great. Alright, so you might be wondering why it's daylight again. We had a snag last night, which was that I was missing a tool to be able to tighten the bolts that were provided by Rennline into the strut brace inside the car. And this is something I'm finding a lot as a new owner, is that as I'm installing pieces, as I'm fixing parts of the car, having no previous background or history in this at all, I just don't have the tools that I need to get a lot of the jobs done. So a lot of this is just trying to figure out what I need to get something to work on the car, where I need to order it from, and all those sorts of things. And these are exactly the things that don't come with the instructions, and you just sort of have to sit down and figure out yourself. The Bentley manual is hugely helpful in giving you all of the dimensions and the specs and the torques and all that kind of stuff. But I tried to attack this last night with my 17mm sprocket, which is of course what I used to take the factory bolts out of the car, and in fact what I needed was an 8mm hex key. So that's arrived now thanks to Amazon Prime, and I'm going to get this finished up. Alright, so we need to reach for our Bible. The Bentley manual, you're going to turn to 401.2. 401's all to do with the front suspensions, everything you need to know is in here. 401.2 is a breakdown of everything that goes down through these struts. We're looking for bolt number 4, which tells us that we need to tighten this to 34 foot-pounds. So torque wrench and our new hex key, I'm going to get to work on that. Alright, and that wraps up that install. So all in all, that went really well. Rennline makes amazing gear. Got to check them out. It's kind of like a bespoke suit made to fit your 911. The process went really smoothly. Honestly, the most difficult part of it was making this video. I totally underestimated all the work that goes in to making things like this. Like some of the guys out there, like I mentioned before, many have seen Home Built by Jeff. You've got to check out these two guys. I watched those videos. I'm enthralled by everything that they're doing. They're experts at this kind of stuff, where I'm not. But I totally took for granted how much work goes into making something like this. I would estimate that this install should probably take between 30 and 60 minutes, rather than an entire afternoon and a little bit of the following morning, provided you've got the right tools, of course, right? So yeah, that wraps up this one. If anyone's got any helpful comments or noticed that I did anything wrong, of course I'm learning. I'd benefit from anything that anybody's got, any help or advice anybody's got to give. The forums at Pelican are so helpful, everyone's so generous with their knowledge. The internet's a wealth of information out there, but again, I still find that as somebody who's new to this, working on these cars is a really daunting process if you haven't done anything like this before. So I'm enjoying the learning curve, and I'm hoping that a little step-by-step like this is going to be helpful to somebody else out there that's at a similar sort of stage that I am. So if this helps, then that's great, and I'll look forward to showing you guys the next thing I do with the car.